Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today, PB&J and the Momentous peanut butter hearings. An average American child eats about 1,500 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from adolescence to graduating from high school. That is about one PB&J sandwich every 4 days or so. Needless to say, when roping in other uses for the food item, Americans eat a lot of peanut butter. What's less known is that peanut butter had a tremendous impact on how foods are made and labeled today, thanks to what are known as the peanut butter hearings. Contrary to popular belief, peanut butter was not invented by George Washington Carver. For instance, around the 14th and 15th centuries, the Aztecs of Mexico made peanut paste by mashing up roasted peanuts, and there's also possible peanut butters that even predate this. More recently, while Carver developed innovative ways to cultivate, use, and grow peanuts, among numerous other innovations in various areas, it was actually Canadian and Montreal native Marcellus Gilmore Edson who applied for US Patent 306727 in 1884 when Carver was about 20 years old. The patent described a process for milling roasted peanuts until the peanuts reached a fluid or semi-fluid state to form a flavoring paste from said peanuts. In other words, peanut butter. In 1898, John Kellogg, yes, of the cereal fame, received a patent for a process of producing alimentary products, in which he improved this food item using boiled peanuts instead of roasted, that turns the paste into the same consistency as hard butter or soft cheese. Kellogg thought so highly of this new product that he served it to the residents of his religious healthy living sanctuary and somewhat infamous Battle Creek Sanitarium. It was at C.H. Sumner's concession stand at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis when peanut butter was first introduced more widely to the masses. He apparently sold over $700 of peanut butter there, which is about $18,000 today, while also selling other recently introduced foods like hot dogs in buns and ice cream in cones. Krema Products in Columbus, Ohio began mass-producing peanut butter in 1908, and to this day, it is the oldest peanut butter manufacturing company still around. By the time peanut butter and jelly sandwiches became a mainstay in American soldiers' diets during World War II, you can see our video on the surprisingly short history of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich for more on that one. Peanut butter had already become a staple in every American's kitchen cabinet. The United States government first became concerned about what was put into their citizens' food way back in 1862 when President Abraham Lincoln appointed Charles M. Wetherill to oversee the chemical division of the newly formed Department of Agriculture. A noted chemist himself, Wetherill's first project was a chemical study of grape juice for winemaking to decide if adding sugar to increase alcohol content should be considered adulteration. Wetherill determined that it was not. The study also alluded to problems of food preservation and uses of chemical preservatives. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, or as it was more widely known then, the Wiley Act, was the next big step in protecting American consumers from mislabeled food or unlabeled food products. Pioneered by Chief Chemist of the Department of Agriculture and crusader against food adulteration, Harvey W. Wiley, the act fought against false advertising, mislabeling, and adulteration of foods and medicines. It also prevented interstate commerce of items that were not properly labeled. Soon, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, under several different names until 1927, was formed in order to regulate and uphold the law. While the FDA did an admirable job trying to regulate labeling and prevent food adulteration, the addition of a non-food item to increase the weight or quantity of the food item, which may result in the loss of actual quality of food, manufacturers, well, they found loopholes. As the FDA points out, the frozen foods industry that cropped up and prospered after World War II consumed a lot of the FDA's energy and manpower. With new products like frozen TV dinners, freeze-dried coffee, and instant chocolate drink being introduced to the market, the FDA had to figure out what constituted food adulteration and what a label on these types of foods should and should not say. Due to this lack of manpower, though, the FDA at this time allowed manufacturers of foods that already existed to tweak their recipe without needing the FDA's approval. And this is how we get to the infamous peanut butter hearings. Since the 1940s, the peanut butter industry had been asking the FDA if the addition of glycerin, a sugar alcohol that can act as a sweetener and food preservative, constitutes food adulteration. The FDA responded that peanut butter is generally understood to mean a product consisting solely of ground roasted peanuts with or without a small quantity of added salt. So if glycerin is added, it has to be on the label. With Jif brand's peanut butter entering the market in 1958 and quickly becoming a huge competitor to the other other main peanut butter brands, Skippy and Peanut Butter, all still exist today by the way, the manufacturers found other ways to grow their bottom line and still put peanut butter on a jar. For instance, prior to the late 1950s, the hydrogenated oil that was used to provide consistency was peanut oil. In 1958, manufacturers began using other, cheaper hydrogenated oils like cottonseed, rapeseed, canola, and soy instead of peanut oil in their peanut butter. Jif, in an effort to overtake Skippy and Peter Pan, added sweeteners and reduced their actual peanut butter content to improve the flavor and increase the profit margin. According to a lab study, and we should note here that this was a lab study done by Skippy's parent company, Best Foods, Jif peanut butter contained 25% hydrogenated oil and only 75% actual peanuts. This greatly concerned the FDA and other consumer groups. In 1958, the FDA administered the Food Additive Amendment, which established that chemicals or substances that can be generally recognized as safe can be used in food without further testing. The Delaney Clause also said that if it doesn't cause cancer in man or animal, the additive can be used. Of course, this would lead to big issues down the road, but it allowed them to set standards on the amount of hydrogenated oil used in peanut butter. A 1959 press release said that mass-produced peanut butters, on average, had reduced their peanut content by about 20%, which wasn't appropriate. In response, the FDA set the standard at 95% peanuts and 5% optional ingredients, including salt, sugar, dextrose, honey, or hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated peanut oil, in order for it to be called peanut butter. Well, it did not sit well with the peanut butter industry. For the next 12 years, the peanut butter case and the subsequent hearings, the peanut butter hearings, would embroil the FDA and peanut butter manufacturers in a heated courtroom feud. Back and forth they went, negotiating peanut percentages to determine when something stopped being peanut butter and just started being a peanut spread. In 1961, the FDA agreed to roll back the percentage to 90 to hurry along a compromise, but the manufacturers, they still disagreed. So the FDA instead announced that the issue warranted further study. Negotiations then continued for another 10 years. The FDA's own history of the case comments that a prominent attorney on the case wryly observed that the peanut butter standards put many lawyers' children through college. In 1965, dramatic public hearings were held with the high-powered peanut butter manufacturing lawyers on one side and consumer activist groups, which were very much encouraged by the FDA, on the other. These were led by Ruth Desmond, who had become known as the Peanut Butter Lady. The hearings were sensational, full of narrative, like Desmond making dinner for her husband every day before she went to court. They were widely covered by the press, took 5 months, and produced over 8,000 pages of transcript. Still, it would take another 5 years for the matter to be settled. In 1968, the FDA stated that their findings determined that the line between what is peanut butter and what is peanut spread was 90% peanuts and 10% additives. After a long appeals process, the new standard went into effect on May 3rd, 1971. So, after vast sums of taxpayer dollars spent and years of legal rambling, from that point forward, peanut butter officially had to be 90% peanuts. If it wasn't, it could still be sold, but it had to be labeled peanut spread rather than peanut butter. The same went with certain other foods like jellies or jams, which were also required to meet similar types of standards. In his book, Creamy and Crunchy, An Informal History of Peanut Butter by John Crampner, the FDA official who was in charge of arguing the FDA's case, Ben Gutterman, commented that if we had said 83, they'd have gone to 80. They were saying nutritionally it's the same, price-wise it's the same. We were asking, but when does it stop being peanut butter? In the end, the lengthy and extremely expensive battle over what constitutes peanut butter versus peanut spread resulted in shifting views concerning the Food Standards Program in the United States, which in turn spurred on new regulations for food labeling, as well as general counsel being convened to make sure food regulation practices would not interfere with the creation of new types of food products. As law professor Richard Merrill noted, we concluded that regulation should shift away from controlling food composition and focus on providing consumers with more complete information about foods. And now for some bonus facts. Pringles were originally called Pringles Newfangled Potato Chips. However, Pringles only contained about 42% potato-based content, with most of the rest being from wheat starch and various types of flour, including from corn and rice. Thus, the US Food and Drug Administration made them change the name because their product didn't technically meet the definition of a potato chip. So they were only allowed to use the word chip in very restrictive ways. Specifically, if they wanted to continue to use the word chip, they would have to say Pringles potato chips made from from dried potatoes, but they weren't too fond of this requirement, so the company changed the name slightly, using potato crisps rather than potato chips. Today, of course, most people just know them as Pringles. Across the pond, things went a little differently. While Procter & Gamble initially argued that Pringles were in fact chips in the US, in the UK this created a problem. In order to avoid a 17.5% value-added tax, VAT, in the UK, Procter & Gamble stated that Pringles should be considered a cake rather than a crisp. Their argument was that since only 42% of it is made from potato and that it's actually made from dough, therefore it should be considered a cake and not subject to the tax that's put on chips. After all, that's why the US Food and Drug Administration had previously made them change it from being a chip to a crisp. The company initially won in the High Court and were briefly considered a cake in the UK. However, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs appealed the decision, and in 2009 the ruling was reversed and the company had to start paying the VAT. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below and do not forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also support us in making these brand new videos every day if you want to. You can go to patreon.com/TodayIFoundOut. We got great perks lined up for people who support us, so please go check it out. Link in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching.